Hello and welcome. We're coming to you this week from Mumbai, a city that reflects the growing divide between rich and poor across the country. While India has the fastest growing number of millionaires in the world, it also has more than 700 million people who are living on less than $2 per day. Now, Mumbai attracts many people from around the country, hoping to better their lives. By more than half of the population ends up in slums or shanty towns. While India has experienced strong economic growth in recent years that has swelled the ranks of the middle classes, the global economic crisis has also arrived at its shores, making the outlook for the poor even more uncertain. So today we're asking what can be done to reduce the gap between India's rich and poor in India's cities. And don't forget, you can take part by contacting us at the numbers at the bottom of your screen, or you can join the chat room by logging on to livestation.com. Joining us here in Mumbai to discuss the issues are Milind Deora, who's at 32, one of the youngest members of India's lower house of parliament, where he represents Mumbai South. He also established Sparsh, an NGO aimed at helping the poor. Also joining us is social activist Gerson Da Cunha, a member of the Action for Good Governance and Networking in India, a non-political citizen group that aims to increase government transparency and raise awareness of people's rights. I welcome you both to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Well, Milind Deora, first, the global economic turndown obviously is something everyone's discussing around the world. How much of you are you feeling the pinch in India?
Well, I think India's feeling the pinch in many ways. Of course, urban India, the goods and services that we produce, the economy is largely driven on the services sector, the manufacturing sector. So investments are down, access to finance is down. 60% of our population continues to be dependent on the rural economy, the agricultural economy. So they haven't felt a direct impact as yet, but it's bound to happen gradually. In fact, only recently I was reading that with investments down and with low access to capital, for example, in food processing, where you actually take products from the farm and export them, gradually, even when it translates back to the farmer, people are beginning to feel the crunch. But that would be a more indirect impact. I think the urban Indian is feeling that impact every day.
Interestingly, when India was gung-ho with a good, strong economy and everyone was very optimistic, the government put out some very sort of high-end spending plans, expensive spending plans, and reduced the deficit too, significantly. What danger is there now those programs can't be funded?
Well, I don't think there's a danger of that. I think the government has accrued a lot of tax revenue in the past, which will see them through in the future. But I think a lot of projects, when they involve infrastructure spending, for example, it's not the government that puts in all the money. So if the government says we are investing $1 billion into a road project, that would usually mean you involve the private sector also. So government share of capital spending might be quite low. But of course, there is a hit with regards to sentiment and infrastructure space, construction space. All these are areas which improve a lot of job growth. They're witnessing a backward trend. So I think the government has to do a lot more at a national level to actually increase spending to propel growth, which in the long run will lead to more job creation.
Okay. Gerson Da Cunha, there's obviously a large amount of money has been earmarked by the government for helping the poor, those in need. How much of that money tends to reach them? I mean, is there a genuine transfer of those funds to those who need?
15% actually reaches the little woman who wants a new sewing machine, or the little man who wants to buy a new buffalo. You know, I was part of Rajiv Gandhis thing in Delhi, and he was meant to be approving something called the Integrated Rural Development Project, which is still happening at the moment. Things have got worse and have not improved since then. And he said, before we approve this enormous sum of money, and it was enormous, he says, let's do a piece of research to find out how much of it will actually reach the people we want to benefit. And in 8 months, the results came back. 85% of it leaked. Only 15% got there.
Now, you know that we see in India visibly a big difference now. The wealth is quite evident at the top end. There's a big divide between the rich and the poor, it seems. Is that an inevitable consequence of rapid growth and rapid economic development? Is this something that can't be avoided, that gap widening?
Well, it is, that is a factor. But then, you know, there is something that is eternal, that is at least 5,000 years in this country, and that is caste, where there are some people who are meant to be poor, who are poor, and who believe that they are meant to be poor. You know, more than 40% of the population of this country is below the poverty line. And of that, 90% belong to what you may call the lower castes, to use a crude term.
I want to get an email to you, actually, if I may, please, Milind. It's an email that came from Ashfaq Motlekar, who writes in saying, India taxes and double taxes, housing, making it unaffordable. Can any sensible, well-meaning government afford to remain a passive spectator, only concerned with how to milk the industry for revenue?
Well, you know, there are a different set of taxes in India. So there are federal taxes, then there are state taxes. There has been a move when the central government initiated the VAT, value-added tax, and they brought all the state governments together, and they're in the process of implementing that around the place. But I think how you actually improve, reduce housing prices, how you give people access to housing credit, that's something that's being hotly debated today. Because with inflation more under control, there's growing pressure on the Reserve Bank of India, our central bank, to actually cut interest rates further. And once that happens, automatically you'll see large banks and large financial institutions who lend to individuals in the consumer finance area to buy a home, they'll end up reducing their rates. So that, to a large extent, besides what the government taxes you, is really driven by market economics. I mean, it's driven by, does a company borrow at a certain cost, and how do they transfer that borrowed cost onto the consumer? That will happen eventually once we lower interest rates.
May I add to that answer? You know, it's not just taxes that keeps the price of housing at an unaffordable level. It is the shortages that are almost intentionally created, which are responsible for 90% of the cost of that housing. Taxes may represent 10%. So the question is, how do you deal with the politics that keep prices at that? For example, at one point, Bombay had the highest rate of real estate in the world, including Tokyo. Now, and for what? What do you buy?
I think that's true. I mean, there's a financial aspect to it, and then, like he said, I mean, it's how do you as a government create a policy that ensures adequate supply in the market that meets the demand? Because that mismatch that occurs between demand and supply will lead to artificial prices. But different state governments have different policies. Some work, some have worked in the past, some haven't worked in the past, some are being changed and relooked at. But that's something that I think as a policy level, we have to sort of come to terms with, that how do we actually create a robust policy that allows for greater housing supply.
Gerson ji, if I may, this email that came in from Khalid Al-Haribi in Salalah in Oman says, are there any successful examples of a win-win situation for developers, politicians and low-income individuals to resolve the housing crisis that might be applicable not only to Mumbai but to the rest of the world?
No, there's no easy solution. Not when you're surrounded by a government that is sold out to the builder. Now, I don't expect Milind to react to that at once, but we in this state, and I only have experience of Bombay, we are a government here that is, I believe, anti-city and anti-people. Every little decision, from whether a road should be built or not built, whether potholes should be filled or not filled, is determined by a builder lobby. So I don't think it would be very easy. There is no slick solution to the housing shortage until you deal with the politics of this city.
Tell me about the 3 C's that determine the vote. That's something we were having a discussion earlier, and you gave me a very interesting example of how the vote is determined here.
You know, our polity is a corrupt and dysfunctional one. When the elections took place to the municipality of Bombay in February 2007, we said if we want a better corporation, we need better candidates so that we have better corporators. And then we decided to rate the candidates and to rate them in the way that hotels rate themselves, 1, 2, 3 stars. And we thought we'd tell the political leaderships that this is what we were going to do. So the head in this state of a major party we went to, and he listened to us patiently. He said, you're perfectly right, you must rate them and maybe we'll get better candidates. As we were leaving, he said, you can do all that, Suktankar. We were led by a gentleman called Suktankar. You can do all that, Suktankar, but remember, the seats will go by the 3 C's. And Suktankar said, 3 C's? He said, yes. Caste, cash, and crime. So that's the kind of democracy we happen to have, according to a leading politician in our state.
I will give our leading politician a chance to respond in a moment. We have to take a short break, so Gerson Da Cunha and Milind Deora, stay with us. Now, before we take the short break, we can share with you that we went to one of the slums, the biggest slums in Mumbai, Bharat Nagar, to get opinions on who they feel is responsible for their awful living conditions.
दिल्ली में हाँ क्या पता क्यों आ गया, हमको खुद नहीं पता लगा।
कमाने के लिए
दिन भी अगर सरकार कुछ
वोट
देगी
लेके
तो हम लोग
जाते
यहाँ रहना
मगर
पसंद नहीं
सरकार
करेंगे
कुछ
धूल
देते
मिट्टी
नहीं।
में। क्यों? लेकिन सरकार हमारे साथ अत्याचार अगर करेगी तो सरकार से हम डरने वाले नहीं हैं। क्यों मैडम, ऐसा हमारे को नहीं लगता है कि हमारा गंदगी होगी, क्योंकि हम सब प्यार हो गया है। ऐसी जिंदगी हमारी कुछ नहीं है।
हमारे नसीब से तुम ये झोपड़पट्टी में रहते हो और वो लोग ये इतने बड़े मकान में रहते हो। क्यों?
सबका नसीब है अपना अपना।
Everyone